So if you look at this row again has a filter context because again we're looking at a zero here. So this is a filter context in a zero regarding year 2023 for Apple. So now let's go to that table. Now we are filtering the data for Apple in year 2023. So that's a 4 rows we're talking about. So Power BI basically first imposed this filter on this data table. Now we are filtered out only these 4 rows to work with. All right, and because again we have a block of 4 rows, there's no single row involved here. There's no particular row context Power BI can work on. Okay, so Power BI has to use the 4 rows and take aggregation of the 4 rows regarding this column assets end of year. All right, and because in this zero we tell Power BI to do the summation. Okay, if there's multiple rows and there's no row context to figure out, okay, you just use the summation of these 4 rows. Then Power BI is going to use the summation. Okay, this 228 is basically the summation of these 4 rows. Okay, that's the reason you see this 128. Okay, that's the reason why, although kind of you thought you are going to get the assets at the end of year of 2023 for Apple, you actually get a very different number, and that number is the summation of these 4 rows, okay, across these 4 rows regarding this data field assets end of year. All right, that's basically because the zero do not have a row context. It only has a filter context. Okay, so it works very differently from a data table. Okay, let's keep looking at another example. Okay, if you look at this row, this first row here, okay, this first row is talking about Apple in general. All right, in this case the filter context is gonna regarding Apple, and there's no particular year we're talking about. So, okay, so in this case the filter context regarding Apple is gonna filter out this 8 rows altogether. Okay, this block of 8 rows is regarding Apple. Okay, and again the aggregation function says, okay, now we have a filtered data table, and we need to sum this data field across the rows in this filtered data table. All right, so that's why Power BI will just sum up all those numbers across these 8 rows. Okay, let's check this number. Okay, it's gonna be equal to, I'm sure it's gonna be equal to the number shown on that zero. Okay, 260. Yeah, exactly, we have 260 here. Okay, so basically here, once you tell Power BI in a zero, this is the filter I'm looking at, Power BI is gonna impose this filter regarding Apple only. Okay, on the data set you're working on. So because this filter will filter out this 8 rows, Power BI will next sum up this data field across these 8 rows and give you the summation. All right, so now you understand how a calculate column will actually behave in a zero. All right, in the zero environment there's no row context anymore, there's only filter context, and each particular row in this matrix will give you a filter to kind of filter that original data set and take out a particular block of rows after this filter is being imposed. And that block of rows is gonna be the data environment you're gonna work on. All right, and because there's no single row to determine a row context, there's just a block of rows you have to work with, then there must be some aggregation function you need to choose to do the aggregation of that calculate column across different rows. All right, so let's check what if we change this sum to say average. All right, again for this row year 2022 Apple, there's 4 rows being filtered out, and the average of this 4 rows regarding assets end of year is going to be 33 because these four values are the same, all 33s, okay? So the average is going to be 33 as well. So that's why you see 33 being here, okay? That's just average across the four rows. For year 2023, same deal. We're looking at this four rows, okay? Because that's a rows being filtered out based on this particular filter context, okay? And this four rows, SSEOY has a value of 32 across these four rows. So the average is still 32, okay? However, if you look at Apple in general, this very first row here, this filter context tells we're going to impose a filter regarding Apple only. There's no particular year filter there, okay? So now Power BI is going to work on this block of rows, only regarding Apple, no particular year filtered out, okay? So across this 8 rows, what's the average? So we have value 33 and value 32, okay? So the average turns out to be 32.5, okay? That's exactly how the calculate column is being kind of processed in a VIRO context, okay? In a VIRO environment, when you have a filter context specified by a particular row here, okay? So that said, basically when you try to introduce a calculate column into a VIRO, you need to be very careful, okay? Because as I said, originally, perhaps you think, okay, I'll just pull this SS end of year to be the value for this table, okay? So that's what we originally did, right? We thought once we pull this data field here, we're going to basically see on this VIRO for each particular year, for a particular stock, what's going to be the assets at the end of that year, all right? Turns out it's very different, right? So we want to have something located here to show me what's going to be the assets at the end of the year for Apple in year 2022. I want a cell here showing that value, okay? So that's why I kind of pull this data field here to be the values. But it turns out it gave me the summation, all right? It doesn't give me the actual end of year assets for year 2022 or for year 2023, okay?